Part 26. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 264. Cobra continued, there are still more than kings in the king's army. They are gathered in Arapena and the surrounding areas. Since the rebel army cannot attack now, then I can use of them for mobile operations to deal with them. Crocodile. Sanji sighed after hearing this. 100,000 troops. If 100,000 troops were to be used, Crocodile would probably have some difficulty. Wei looked at Cobra and said, "Father, you really dare to spend a lot of money to defeat the enemy." Nami said, "An army of 100,000 is really strong. I'm afraid Crocodile can't stand such an army." Cobra said, "No, I'm just worried. Even with such a large army, it's impossible to defeat Crocodile." Nami thought for a moment and then asked, "Your Majesty, then I would like to ask. Have you ever seen Crocodile show off his skills with your own eyes?" Cobra looked at Nami and said thoughtfully, "I only saw it once at the kingdom's new port, when a group of pirates happened to attack there. As a result, the elusive and mysterious King Shishibukai appeared. As soon as he appeared, he blew up the dust and wiped out the pirates. At that time, he turned into dust and disappeared again in the eyes of people's admiration." Hearing this, both Sanji and Nami could sense the situation from Cobra's expression. You can also feel how mysterious and powerful Crocodile is. After listening to what you said, I feel like he is really difficult to deal with, Nami said. Sanji thought for a while and said to Cobra, "Your Majesty, I think if I were Crocodile, then I would definitely try to attack you." As soon as Sanji's words came out, Nami and Wei's expressions became a little ugly. Cobra was still serious and calm. "Sanji, you think so?" Cobra said. Sanji continued, "Of course. Because Crocodile wants to plunge Alabasta into complete chaos, he must completely destroy all the major forces. Who is the core of the king's army?" "Your Majesty. So I think Crocodile will attack you." Cobra nodded and said, "You are right. I am the core of the king's army camp. Once my flag falls, the king's army will also collapse. This is why, Your Majesty, you will become a target. So Your Majesty, you must be careful. And besides you, Princess Wei may also be in danger." Sanji looked at Wei again. Wei's face was also very serious. "Crocodile and Baroque Studios are very likely to attack the royal family of Alabasta, that is, King Cobra and Princess Vivi. Of course, the ultimate goal is to get rid of or control Cobra, so that they can satisfy their own desires." Cobra looked at the map of Alabasta and said, "The future of this country may depend on my choice. Although it has been in civil war for several years, I still have great influence. Crocodile will definitely keep an eye on me." Now Cobra is % sure that Crocodile will definitely attack him. And if attacking him fails, they will attack Wei to indirectly threaten him. Cobra looked at Vivi with concern. This strong princess personally broke into the enemy camp for the future of the kingdom. And brought back important information and these friends. "Wei, we must pay attention to our own safety. This is related to Alabasta's national future," Cobra said earnestly. Wei looked at Cobra firmly and said, "It's me, I will pay attention. The safety of the kingdom now lies with two people, and Crocodile's claws will definitely reach out to them." Cobra looked at Sanji again and said, "Viva can make friends like you. It's not only an honor for her, but also for me and Alabasta. But I really want to see what the other friends are like." Sanji said politely, "We are friends with Wei. But as for the others, I will contact them as soon as possible. I don't know what their situation is in the Rainland." Cobra said, "Okay, if I can see them, I will be very grateful to them. I really hope that day comes early." Nami said at this time, "Of course it will be, but when that time comes, especially after defeating Crocodile, we have to celebrate properly." Cobra nodded kindly and said, Definitely. Your Majesty, I have something to ask, Sanji said to Cobra. Cobra looked at Sanji and said, "What?" Sanji said, "There has been a civil war in Alabasta for many years, and Alabasta is also one of the countries with the largest world government. Is there any movement in the world government?" Cobra thought for a while and said, "The world government often looks for me." After the Alabasta Civil War broke out, things intensified. In addition, Alabasta is a major member of the world government, so the world government keeps sending envoys here. There are government officials and the Navy. Navy, Sanji said. Yes, the naval force responsible for the waters near Alabasta came to mediate. A captain named Hina led the troops directly under her to mediate here. However, she only had more than 1,000 troops under her command and could not stop the war at all. She also went to negotiate with the rebels, but they didn't listen at all, Cobra said. After hearing this, Sanji nodded and said, "That's it?" Cobra didn't know that Sanji and the others were pirates, and the information Vivi gave him was only friends he met overseas. Alas, the world government is really getting worse year by year. There is such a big chaos in Alabasta, and they don't have a decent solution. However, the world government has been suppressing the revolutionary army and pirates for so many years. It has no time to pay attention to Alabasta, too. There is nothing we can do about it. Besides, the troubles in Alabasta need to be solved by ourselves, Cobra said with some regret. Sanji said, "Your Majesty, I believe you can. No, we can definitely solve these things." When Wai Wei heard this, she also said, "Father, we must unite and believe in our own strength. As long as we unite and combine countless forces, we will definitely be able to turn the world around. Yes, trust us." Nami said sweetly. Cobra looked at the three of them, and the sad expression on his face also changed for the better. "Okay, let us unite and survive this crisis. Defeat the enemy," Cobra said with confidence. At this moment, Wai Wei seemed to feel that Rog and Saran were also here, working together with everyone. The night in Arubana became deeper, and after discussing the plan, the four hurried to rest. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 265. After a night's rest, the sun shines on the urban area of Arubana again the next morning. The king's palace was also irradiated. On the balcony of the king's palace, Sanji used the phone bug to contact Rog and the others early in the morning. "Oh, it turned out to be like this. Okay, then hang up first." Sanji then hung up the phone bug. Then Sanji lit a cigarette and stood on the balcony looking at the rising sun in the distance. Sanji just received a very important piece of information. After a while, in the study of the palace, Sanji and Cobra talk again with Nami and Vivi. The coffee and toast made by Sanji are also placed on the table in the study. "Sanji, tell me. You said you just obtained very important information," Cobra asked. Sanji said, "Well, yes. I learned from Rog and the others that crocodile is not in the rain." Wai Wei asked, "What, not in the rain?" "Yes, Rog and Saran have invaded the pyramid building in Rainland. It is the headquarters of the industrial center on the surface of Crocodile. But Crocodile is not there. But Rog and Saran and some Baroque Studios elite enemies have fought," said Sanji. Cobra said thoughtfully, "I know about the pyramid building. Crocodile has purchased many properties, and the headquarters of the consortium is in the pyramid building." Sanji continued, "The key is that Rog got the help of some people who rebelled against the Baroque Studio. The intelligence shows that Crocodile is traveling east from the rainy land. The target is likely to be Aruba. Maybe Crocodile is trying to attack your Majesty." After hearing this, Cobra's expression changed, Vivi's expression changed, and Nami was drinking a cup of coffee. Nami spat out the coffee in shock. She didn't expect it to come so soon. Crocodile is really here, Wei said with a serious face. Cobra's expression was serious, but he seemed to have already understood this point. What was supposed to come has come. Just as we expected, Cobra said. Crocodile will attack Arubina sooner or later, and these people are also very clear. So, Your Majesty. Now we need to be ready at all times. Crocodile will definitely take you as the first target when he arrives here, Sanji said. Cobra looked serious, and after thinking carefully, he said, this is absolutely unavoidable. But I think since I can't avoid it, I'll just use the trick and find a way to set a trap for Crocodile to fall into. Good idea, Vivi said. But you have to be careful, Sanji said. Nami looked at the three of them and said helplessly, what a crazy idea. Cobra continued, okay, let's plan. On the east side of Arubina, a group of people on camels is constantly marching towards the city. This group of people is none other than Smoker, the smoker hunter from the Navy headquarters. Of course, there are also Daisuke and dozens of elite naval soldiers. It's really hot today, don't you think, Colonel Smoker, Duska said while riding on the camel and feeling the sweat. Smoker was riding on a camel further ahead. This strong and scary man still opened his clothes, revealing his well-developed chest and abdominal muscles. Smoker glanced at the scorching sun in the sky. Remember this, Dashki. As a Navy, you must not be afraid of all kinds of difficulties and dangers. Smoker took the opportunity to teach. Dashki said politely, yes, Colonel Smoker. Although some of the more than 50 elite Navy soldiers felt the heat, they still remained silent. Smoker chased Rog and Zoro all the way to Alabasta. We first landed in the rapeseed area, and then went to Aruba to get here according to various situations. Alabasta is now in a very chaotic situation. Smoker, who has always been righteous, also helped some suffering people in Alabasta along the way. After a long journey, I finally arrived in Aruba. It's here, it's just ahead. Smoker and his party arrived at the bottom of the huge cliff in Arubina. Daisuke looked up at the royal capital built on a huge cliff, and sighed, it really deserves to be a city with a history of thousands of years. It's really spectacular. Okay, stop moaning. Let's go, Smoker said. Smoker, Dusky and the Navy soldiers began to walk up the stairs several hundred meters below the East Gate. After marching, we finally arrived in front of the East Gate. There is a group of heavily armed soldiers of the King's Army guarding the gate. Please wait a moment. An officer of the King's Army stepped forward and said with a serious face. Smoker looked at him and said calmly, we are the Navy and need to enter the city. Please let us go. The King's Army officer also judged from their attire that Smoker and the others were in the Navy, but Arubina was very nervous because of the war before. Checks are also strict now. Please report your specific identity and the purpose of coming here. You also need to show relevant documents, the King's Army officer continued. It's really troublesome. Dashiki brought our documents, Smoker said to Dashiki. Daisuke took the Navy certificate from a Navy and handed it to the King's Army officer for inspection. After checking, the officer of the King's Army nodded and said, well, Colonel Smoker and everyone. I still need to ask about the purpose of your coming here. Smoker said, we are here to track down the pirates. A group of very threatening pirates are here. The King's Army officer felt a little strange after hearing this, but then said, Colonel Smoker, you are here to track the pirates. Aren't you coordinating the civil war issues here? Smoker said, we're just chasing pirates. The officer of the King's Army also nodded, and said, you're right. After all, Colonel Hina of the Navy headquarters has also come here to mediate the civil war. I thought the Navy had sent another manpower. Hina, she's here, Smoker said with a change of expression. The King's Army officer said, yes, Colonel Hina mediates here. It's at the reception center in Arupena City. Do you know her, Colonel Smog? It's nothing, I just asked casually. Okay, please open the door for your help, Smoker said. The king's army officer said, yes. The royal army officer ordered the soldiers to open the door quickly. Smoker entered Arupena with Dusky and the navy soldiers. Walking in the urban area of Aruba, Smoker said as he walked, Hina is here too. Dasaiki said jokingly, Colonel Smoker, are you a good match for her? Nonsense, Smoker said, pretending to be stern. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 266. Smoker and his party continued to march in the urban area of Arubina, continuing to collect information. In a building in the center of Arupena, a tall woman in a navy uniform stands here in the courtyard. This woman has long pink hair and beautiful eyebrows. He was wearing a wine-red suit. Wearing a white midshipman's overcoat. There was a cigarette dangling from her red lips. The sky is getting brighter very quickly, the woman said. Footsteps sounded after a while. Two sailors came over to report the situation. Colonel Hina, two voices of admiration sounded. Hina turned her head and saw a gorgeous navy soldier wearing a top hat saluting her. The other was a tough guy with a navy cap on his head and a tough face, saluting her with his steel-gloved hands. Hina also turned her body around, looked directly at them and said, Ah, Zhang and Fen Buddy, what do you two have to report? Zango took the lead and said diligently, Colonel Hina, I want to report that the overall situation in Alabasta is still that the rebel army is in a melee. The king's army is holding on to Aruba. Hina nodded and looked at Fen Buddy again. Fen Buddy said with a serious face and full of loyalty, Colonel Hina, Arupena has now returned to peace. After the tragic battle the day before yesterday, the king's army has completed most of the things yesterday. They continue to arrange for the victims and wounded soldiers. Hina also nodded and said, well, very good. If this is the case, then let's continue helping those people later. Yes, said Zhang Jiao with admiration. As you command, Fen Buddy said loyally. Zango and Fen Buddy respected Colonel Gina very much. However, Zhang worships entertainment idols, and Fen Buddy worships military heroes in admiration. Hina looked at the courtyard again, and said, the civil war in Alabasta is really endless. I have been here for a long time. There is no improvement at all. But fortunately, the situation here has not continued to deteriorate. At least on the side of the king's army stabilize. Zhang Gao looked at Hina and asked, the civil war in Alabasta is still chaotic and there is no real peace. Why do you say that the situation has not continued to deteriorate, Colonel? Colonel Hina said, it seems that you still dance too much. This is a general issue of governing the country. Think about who the legal official government of Alabasta is, Nefertari Cow, who is recognized by the world government. King Bora. The rebels were originally the driving force of the civil war. Their chaos and weakness can actually speed up the end of the civil war. So just don't be chaotic on the king's side. Zhang Jiao said with a vague understanding, that's it? Fen Buddy quickly clapped his hands and praised, saying, you are indeed Colonel Hina, your analysis is really conclusive. Colonel Hina said, okay, wait for me to drink a glass of water. Let's go and help the people who suffered in the previous battle. Okay, Zhang Jiao and Fen Buddy said at the same time. At this time, in the city of Arubina, there are already two naval forces, Smoker and Gina, one is sent by the Navy official, and the other is self-assessed. The Navy belongs to the world government, but apart from these two forces belonging to the world government, there is also a secret force belonging to the world government operating in Aruba. In a hotel in the central city of Aruba. In a room on the fourth floor of this hotel. A group of people in suits gathered here. They were all listening to the instructions of a slender man with a long beard in front of them. This man with a slender beard is none other than Phlox, the chief of CP3, the world government's spy agency. After Furox reported the real information about the civil war in Alabasta to Wu Laoxing, he went north from rapeseed flowers to Aruba. Get in on the action here. Phlox said to the dozen black agents in front of him in a bureaucratic tone, everyone, the crisis inside Alabasta is still serious. I have received instructions from above. The 5 old stars want me to do it no matter what. Ensure the safety of the king of Alabasta. Because of the current situation, the rebels are beginning to be in chaos. As long as Cobra holds on, he will control this country again sooner or later. A burly black agent asked Phlox, Sir, if that's the case, then Crocodile may attack King Cobra. Phlox said, it's not possible, but it will definitely happen. In this situation, Crocodile's way to completely chaos Alabasta is to get rid of or control King Cobra. A black-clothed agent with a stubble asked, Sir, I want to ask. The news that came from the Rainland before was that the pyramid building at the headquarters of the Crocodile Consortium was destroyed. How do you judge the action against us based on this news? What impact does it have? Phlox, I can tell based on the intelligence that Crocodile has enemies. He offended many people by running the Great Route before he called the king Shishibukai. There must be enemies who came here to seek revenge. Anyway, since there are a third unknown force came to Alabasta to attack Crocodile, which can somewhat restrain some of his energy. But we can't pin our hopes on those people, we still need us to play a role at critical moments. CP3's intelligence network also quickly learned of the fierce fighting in UD and the collapse and sinking of the pyramid building. A medium-sized agent in black asked, So, sir, how should we proceed? Phlox said, you put on your civilian clothes. Protect King Cobra secretly near the king's palace and detect information about suspicious people. But after all, we are a spy organization of the world government. Once exposed, we still have to identify ourselves to the king's army. It will definitely not make things difficult for us. I'm worried about Baroque Studio. They are agents to begin with, so we are now using agents against agents. Do you understand? Understood. The agents in black said together. Phlox said seriously, get ready for action, I wish you good luck. The agents in black then left the room one after another. Phlox watched everyone leave. CP3 is one of the powerful espionage organizations under the world government. Although the team members' combat capabilities are weaker than the legendary CP9, their ability to gather information is not inferior. According to the intelligence obtained, Crocodile is very powerful. If he really takes action, I'm afraid everyone in CP3 won't be able to stop him even if they try their best. However, there are King's army and some masters beside Cobra. If they cooperate, they may be able to contain Crocodile and keep Cobra. Of course, there is also the group of unknown people who destroyed the pyramid building before. Phlox sat down, lit his pipe and started smoking. He took a deep breath of the smoke ring. The current direction of the situation in Alabasta is already betting on the safety of Cobra alone. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 267. Once Cobra is eliminated or controlled by Crocodile, the situation in Alabasta will be completely controlled by Crocodile. This time, no matter what, it must be successful, said Phlox. Now it is impossible to truly defeat Crocodile just relying on the strength of CP3. Alabasta's royal army and ministers of defense, and even unknown anti-crocodile forces, can all be targeted. All major forces are operating around Cobra. However, all of this was caused by Crocodile's goal of targeting Cobra. The Sandora River in central Alabasta. This river is located on the dividing line between the eastern and western parts of Alabasta. For thousands of years, it was precisely because of the nourishment of the Sandora River that Alabasta was able to give birth to civilization. Even after people later invented methods of drilling wells to collect water and store rainwater, this river was still very important. However, due to drought in Alabasta in recent years, precipitation in the Sundala River has also dropped sharply. Less and less water is falling in the northern mountains. Even because of this, the downstream estuary of the Sentara River was reversely eroded by sea water. The sky is still bright and sunny, and the bright sun shines on the Sandora River. The banks of this river of life are lined with date palms and wheat fields. Some local people living on both sides of the strait are farming their fields. The harvest here is still good today. A mature farmer stood in the wheat field and said to the thriving wheat, "Really? Even if we fight a war for several years, we can still produce so much food and fruits here to supply the needs of all parts of the country." Another farmer with a gray beard said while cutting wheat. The middle-aged farmer looked at the old farmer and said, "What's wrong, old man? Do you feel uncomfortable? Our life here is indeed richer than in other areas. But isn't that the land left to us by our ancestors?" The old farmer shook his head, sighed and said, "You are thinking too simply. Although we can still have enough food and clothing here, if you think about it, if a building collapses, the people inside will not be spared. Really Alaba, when it comes time for Stan to really die, you and I can't escape." The middle-aged farmer also felt that it made sense, and said, "Is this the case? It seems to be true. But you have also heard that the southeast occupied by the rebel army is already in complete chaos. The rebel army is the main force driving the civil war. Once they are over, then the king's army will quickly unify Alabasta, and peace will come back." The old farmer put the harvested wheat on the ground, and said, "It's good that it's really like this. But I always feel that the crisis has not passed, and it will be even bigger." The mature farmer said indifferently, "Old man, you think too much." The old farmer still looked confused, unable to see where this country would go. Suddenly the old farmer saw a sandstorm flying over from the far west. The farmland where the two are located is located on the east bank of the Sandora River. "I saw a huge sandstorm moving eastward from the west bank." "What is this?" The old farmer looked at the sandstorm in surprise. The mature farmer also turned his head to look at the sandstorm flying to the west. "This, oh my God!" The middle-aged farmer was shocked when he saw the sandstorm. This group of dust storms moved here quickly. And the movement of the sandstorm is a bit weird. It seems to be manipulated by some kind of force. The dust storm swirled to the west bank of the Sandora River, and then disturbed the otherwise calm drinking water, moving from above the river to the east bank of the Sandora River. In just a few minutes, the sandstorm had already invaded the farmland where the two of them were. "Old man, run away quickly," the middle-aged farmer shouted urgently. The old farmer looked straight at the sandstorm that kept moving over. Sandstorms destroyed date palm groves and wheat fields. "This is our farmland, you are not allowed to invade it," the old farmer said angrily. The sandstorm seemed to be alive and growing faster. Seems like a response to the old farmer. There seemed to be a voice of contempt in the sandstorm. "Old man, don't be stupid." The middle-aged farmer grabbed the old farmer and took him away. The old farmer was very painful to see the farmland destroyed by the sandstorm. The sandstorm quickly swept across the farmland, turning the pieces of wheat inside into hay. The middle-aged and old farmers hid in the distance, watching the sandstorm continue to go far east. The middle-aged farmer breathed a sigh of relief and immediately scolded the old farmer, "Old man, you don't want your life." The old farmer looked at the receding sandstorm and kept saying, "It has life, it has life." The dust storm continued eastward. The sandstorm continued for a long time, completely left the fertile land along the Sandora River, and finally stopped in the middle of the desert. The dust storm began to subside, and the sand scattered into the surrounding desert. A figure quickly took shape in the center of the sandstorm. Two other figures also fell from the sandstorm. Unlike the calm man in the center, these two people fell down in a very embarrassed state. It's really uncomfortable. A very fat ant wearing goggles stood up and said. She quickly turned away again, and the other man's head sank into the sand. It's really annoying, such a waste. The fat ant's hands changed rapidly, becoming like two huge mole's paws. The fat ant waved her claws and dug in the sand around the other person. The sand was quickly dug up, and the fallen person finally came out. Hey, don't be like an ostrich, the fat ant said, dissatisfied. The person who was dug out was a burly and relatively obese man, wearing tight clothes all over his body, with a scarf around his neck. There is a huge object on the back. The man slowly stood up again, and gently stroked his head to knock the sand off. Thanks, thanks. The man said in that full voice you could drive people crazy. The obese ant was very upset, and said, you might as well not say it, because waiting makes me upset. The man stood up, his face was fat but cute, like a big boy. Just as the big boy and the obese ant stood up, the figure in the center of the sandstorm just landed on the desert in front of them. It was Crocodile with a scar across his face. Crocodile looked at the two of them arrogantly and said, didn't you say you wanted to take a break? I'll let you take a break first. Right, Mr. 4 and Ms. Merry Christmas. The tall, fat boy is Mr. 4, and the fat ant is Ms. Merry Christmas. The two are the best among the high-level combat power of Baroque Studio. In order to achieve his goal in the East, Crocodile brought the two along just in case. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 269. All seven dismounted from their horses and stood on the western bank of the Sandora River. In front of you is the Sandora River, which is calm and open. According to the information on the map, the Sandora River is 300 meters wide. Crossing this river also requires a certain amount of boats. Wow, what a clear river! Chopper and Usopp rushed to the river and lowered their heads to wash their faces with water. It's really refreshing, Usopp said, gulping down the river water. Rog and others also filled the sheepskin bags for water storage. Sauron looked at the wide river and said to Rog, hey, do you have any way to help us cross this river? Leave this to me, Roger said. Rog is also prepared for this. Roger took a log sapling out of his clothes. Everyone, wait a minute. Rog held the log sapling with both hands, and began to use the plant fruit energy in his body. The green plant fruit energy began to inject into this log sapling, and the log sapling began to grow and keep getting bigger. Log boat. Under the action of the energy of the Rog plant fruit, the log sapling grew rapidly and turned into a boat. Although the shape of the boat is relatively rough, it can still float on the water. The log boat is 15 meters long and 3 meters wide. It was enough for 7 people to climb up, including men and horses. Roger said, okay, everyone can go up now. Get on this log boat. Luffy, Usopp, and Chopper happily shouted, okay. 7 men and 6 horses boarded the log boat. Okay, let's set sail to cross the river, Roger said. Cross the Sandora River, Usopp, Luffy and Chopper shouted excitedly. Rog steered the log boat and started heading east. The log canoes began to sail on the calm and gentle Sandora River. Below this broad river, a group of colossal creatures were moving secretly. Those huge eyes are as big as footballs. The uninvited guest moving across the river quickly caught their attention. These giants on the bottom of the river began to swim towards the log canoes. One of them hit the log canoe with its huge head. On the canoe, Rog, Sauron, Usopp, and the Ninja King watched the wide river and the orange-red sunset while taking the boat. What a beautiful sunset! Usopp said leisurely. Luffy took out another cookie from his backpack and stuffed it into his mouth and started chewing it. It's delicious, but I really want to eat fish, Luffy said happily. When Chopper heard this, he was stunned and said again, speaking of fish, I remember when I read the information in the biological illustrated book here. It said that there is a huge catfish in the Sandora River. It is called the Sandora catfish. Usopp looked at him and said, Giant catfish. Chopper's face became a lot more serious, and he continued, in this river, there is a group of catfish that are as huge as whales, and they are also fierce carnivorous creatures. Really, Usopp was so scared that his legs were trembling. Hearing that there was a huge ferocious catfish in the river under his feet, Usopp was full of fear. Luffy was very happy after hearing this. He immediately came over and said, "The catfish has fish to eat." Zoro and Rog, who was operating the canoe, glanced at each other. Now there is a huge catfish under the boat under everyone's feet. At this moment, there was a sudden loud noise. The whole log canoe was suddenly lifted up. This is being lifted up by a huge force. Could it be that? Rog immediately looked around. It's those Santala catfish. Zoro held the scabbard with his hand warily. The Ninja King also touched the burden on his waist. The log canoe has already been lifted, and then thrown aside. This huge impact is enough to overturn the boat. Terrible! Usopp and Chopper hugged each other and shouted in horror. Exciting! Luffy shouted excitedly. However, this log canoe was controlled by Roger after all, and Roger tried his best to stabilize the hull, so that the log canoe finally landed on the river smoothly. Fortunately, it's stable, Roger said. Look at this, Zoro said suddenly. I saw the head of a huge catfish emerging from the water, roaring fiercely at the log boat. The catfish is so large that its head alone is enough to identify it as a whale. The two huge tentacles were 5 meters long and as thick as the cables of a sailboat. And in that mouth are 2 rows of huge sharp teeth. This is the kind of St. Dora catfish, Roger said. Zoro pulled out 2 samurai swords from the scabbard at his waist. At this time, there was another surge on the river, and 3 Santala catfish suddenly rushed out from the front and side of the log boat. More than one head, Saran said. A total of 4 St. Dora catfish surrounded the log canoe from the front, rear, left, and right sides. Each Centaur catfish is more than 20 meters long, comparable to 4 ferocious whales. These 4 Santala catfishes were all greedy for prey and looked at Rog and others on the log boat. So many, but Rog, you seem to be unable to spare your hand, Zoro asked. Well, then I'll leave this to you. Rog must continue to control the log boat and cannot fight. Of course, although these St. Dora catfish are fierce and huge, the strength of Saran and the King of Ninjas is beyond words. No need for Rog to work hard. The St. Dora catfish behind the canoe roared for a while, then opened its bloody mouth and rushed towards it. Zoro clenched the 2 samurai swords in his hands and jumped up. The 2 samurai swords in Zoro's hands slashed from the middle to the sides. The powerful sword energy collapsed. The upper half of the head of the St. Dora catfish was cut open, and blood spurted everywhere in the surrounding river, dyeing the river red. The St. Dora catfish couldn't even make a scream, and the huge carcass fell into the river. But these St. Dora catfish didn't seem to know what death was, and the remaining 3 continued to attack the log boat from the front and left and right sides. At this time, Luffy faced the right direction, stretched his hands back, and charged fiercely. Rubber. Bazooka. Luffy's hand slammed at the St. Dora catfish facing the right side again. This Centaur catfish seemed to have been hit by a rocket launcher, its huge body flipped over in the river. However, this huge monster was not killed, it immediately turned its head over again angrily and rushed over. Luffy threw his right arm far back this time. And the right arm turned into a spiral and was twisted, containing infinite strength. Rubber. Roundabout. Luffy's right arm punched out. This blow was mixed with infinite strength, and Luffy's right fist hit the St. Dora catfish's jaw heavily. Boom. This blow was so powerful that more than a dozen dagger-sized teeth flew out of the St. Dora catfish's mouth. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Ler a dream. Chapter 270. No matter how tough the St. Dora catfish was, they couldn't bear it and plunged into the river and never came up again. The Centaur catfish pounced on the left side of the log boat. The goddess of spring swung the iron axe and whispered a spell. The iron axe was surrounded by wind force, and the last burst of wind force was shot out with great force. Like a machete capable of beheading an elephant, it hit the head of the Santa Dora catfish. Blood spurted from the head of the Centaur catfish, and the behemoth fell into the water and came up with only blood gushing out continuously. However, in front of the log boat, there was a Centaur catfish opening its bloody mouth to attack. The battle between Saran, the goddess of spring water, and Luffy is only the final stage, and there is no time to deal with it. "Oh my god, we're done," Usopp and Chopper shouted in horror. Rog is also ready to fight. At this time, a ghostly figure rushed to the side of St. Dora catfish, and quickly cut it with a knife. This knife was so powerful that it cut a big hole in the side body of the St. Dora catfish. The surrounding river water spurting with blood was everywhere. The St. Dora catfish screamed and trembled violently after being attacked like this. This ghostly figure quickly moved to the bottom of the mouth of the St. Dora catfish, and made another stab. The Sundara catfish had a large gash cut underneath its head. The St. Dora catfish shook violently. The ghostly figure quickly moved over the head of St. Dora catfish, and he could already be seen clearly at this time. Roger thought that he was right. The Ninja King swung his ninja knife and made the final blow to the St. Dora catfish. Puff! The skull of the Santa Dora catfish was cut open and the blood spurted from it. The life in the eyes of the St. Dora catfish disappeared. The Ninja King stood on top of the dead Santa Dora catfish before jumping into the river. It turned out that when the accident occurred just now, the King of Ninjas had already worn water spiders on his feet. With ghostly mobility, the Ninja King walks lightly on the river. As expected of a ninja, Chopper said in shock. Usopp said proudly, "Very good, Captain. Usopp's teachings were not in vain." Chopper said in surprise, "You can do any ninjutsu." Usopp goes out of his way to express his greatness and omnipotence. Rog looked at the King of Ninja and said, "It's really a very strong skill. I will definitely go to Wano country to see the many masters there." The King of Ninja said, "Thank you for the compliment, but I'm afraid there will be more of these creatures coming up now." The King of Ninja has an amazing ability to observe the environment. Sure enough, the seemingly calm river suddenly churned. 7 more Santa Dora catfish came out of the water to surround them. The Ninja King looked at these St. Dora catfish and said, "It seems that we are going to have another hard fight." The King of Ninja, Zoro, Luffy, and the goddess of spring water are all ready. St. Dora catfish besieged, and the King of Ninjas rushed to attack. Roger hit the spirit and operated the log boat to quickly reach the east bank of the wide Santa Dora River. The 5 St. Dora catfish who were besieged were constantly killed. But then the Santala catfish appeared one after another and attacked them. Rog steered the log canoe and finally reached the east bank of this wide river. After arriving at the east coast, Rog said, "Get off the boat quickly." The 7 people hurriedly took the 6 horses off the log boat. Several Centaur catfish rushed up from behind and bit the log boat violently. Roger turned his head and saw that the log boat was bitten into pieces by these St. Dora catfish. Usopp and Chopper said with lingering fear, "It's really terrible. The battle just now made them fearful." Roger turned around and looked towards the east. First there was a date palm grove and wheat fields, and then there was a desert. The paragraph just now was not very long, but it was still memorable. Alabasta, a country with a long history, is full of magic. Even the Centaur River, a seemingly calm river, has such a huge catfish living underneath it. This can also show that Alabasta is a portrayal of a country that is calm on the outside but in crisis inside. "We should go," Roger said. "Don't be in a daze about such a thing, Hurry up! Sauron had already remounted on the horse and started to march east. Others also rode on horses one after another. Oops, Luffy suddenly shouted in panic. Both Rog and Usopp looked at him very strangely. At this time, Luffy's expression can be said to be as if the sky is falling. Luffy hugged his head and said with great annoyance, "I actually forgot to bring the catfish to the shore and how to eat the catfish." Luffy then cried out loudly. Both Usopp and Rog sighed helplessly. It turned out to be such a thing. "Okay, Luffy. Let's go first. Let's defeat Crocodile. After meeting with Sanji, let Sanji come here and cook the St. Dora catfish himself," Rog said. Luffy stopped crying and said, "Yes, it's okay. La la la." Luffy immediately became beaming. The group continued on their way east. The sun was setting more and more. The group first left the fertile land on the east bank of the Sandora River, and then went to the desert. After marching, we finally decided to camp in the desert at 10 o'clock in the evening and rest first. The nights in the Alabasta Desert are very cold. It is in great contrast to the heat of the day. The desert is extremely hot during the day and extremely cold at night. Rog used the power of the plant fruit to grow a group of desert vines, and the goddess of springs used the golden axe to release the flames. The seven gathered around a large fire to keep warm. Delicious roasts are also grilled by the fire pit. Although there is no Sanji, everyone is still skewering beef, green peppers and onions. Sprinkle some salt and pepper and it's still delicious. It's delicious. Luffy happily ate the grilled beef skewers. Roger also chewed on these grilled beef kebabs, and they were still very delicious after a long journey. Usopp kept telling Chopper about his previous desert adventures. "How about you want to continue listening?" Usopp pointed at himself with his thumb. Chopper's eyes shone and he said with admiration, "It's really amazing." Zoro and the King of Ninja toasted each other with a little sake that the King of Ninja carried. The goddess of springs carefully wiped the three axes. After some rest, everyone also felt sleepy one after another. In the end, everyone fell asleep one after another. But everyone doesn't know that the seemingly peaceful night in this desert is also a hidden crisis. Some threatening creatures in the desert attack travelers here in the dark. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee R. A Dream. Chapter 271. The desert is full of mysterious and dangerous creatures. While everyone was resting, there was a sound of surging in the sand for a while. A gigantic figure poked its head out of the sand. But this giant has two heads, and its body has countless joints. The gigantic body kept moving, and finally approached the seven people who were sleeping soundly. The bonfire lit by everyone at this time has not yet been extinguished, and the appearance of this behemoth can be seen more clearly. This is a two-headed centipede tens of meters long. The body of the centipede is split in two in the middle area, with two centipede heads and a body behind it. Two-headed centipedes open huge mouths on both heads. The seven people who are sleeping soundly are its prey. Of course, not everyone is defenseless. The samurai sword held in Zoro's hand at any time while he was sleeping was already about to be slightly unsheathed. And the ninja king who has been training in the dark for a long time has already taken out several shurikens in his hands. The two-headed centipede continued to move forward, and the two of them were ready to attack at any time. At this moment, suddenly a string of flames flew over. The flames enveloped the huge two-headed centipede. The two-headed centipede struggled desperately. However, the two-headed centipede couldn't bear the high temperature, and finally fell down slowly. Those flames hadn't burned out yet, and continued to wreak havoc on the huge body of the two-headed centipede. The huge flame and the scream of the two-headed centipede woke everyone up. Roger and Usopp stood up quickly. Chopper also jumped up in fright, and looked at the burning two-headed centipede in fear. What is this?" Chopper said, trembling with fear. The goddess of spring water also looked around calmly. Sauron and the King of Ninjas had long been fully armed to observe all the movements around them. This double-headed centipede is not surprising, but why was it suddenly attacked and wrapped in flames? What the hell is going on? Rog said strangely. Usopp looked around, took out his slingshot and was always on guard to attack at any time. When he looked at the desert, he saw that Luffy was still sleeping on his back. Snoring. Even though such a big thing happened, Luffy still snored to sleep. Bastard! Usopp went up and punched Luffy. Luffy, who was beaten with staring eyes, stood up reluctantly. "Ah, what's going on?" Luffy said unsteadily. "Idiot, your eyes are white," Usopp scolded. After seeing the burning two-headed centipede, Luffy's face suddenly became pleasantly surprised. "Wow, grilled centipede," Luffy said happily. Usopp didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and said, "You actually said this?" Rog and Sauron looked at the two-headed centipede burned to death with serious expressions. "Who is he?" Rog said strangely. Obviously, the two-headed centipede wanted to attack everyone, but was killed by someone using a flame attack. When everyone was at a loss, a voice suddenly sounded. The sound was like a whistle. The sound got closer and closer, and the last figure walked from the side of the burned two-headed centipede. It was a tall, burly figure. He wears a hat and a cloak. "Hey, it's good that you're fine," the man said a word. Rog and Sauron continued to look at the comber. Luffy was stunned for a moment, then opened his mouth. "Ace," Luffy said in surprise. The visitor raised the brim of his hat and looked at Luffy. Under the light of the fire, it was a mature yet somewhat childish face, and the pair of jet black eyes had a kind of rebellion. The young face has a group of freckles. Although he was wearing a cloak, there were still strong muscles on his chest. "Luffy," the other party said strangely. Luffy rushed over excitedly and hugged each other. "Brother!" Luffy shouted loudly. Usopp and everyone said strangely, "Brother." Everyone was very surprised that Luffy actually had an older brother. After Luffy let go of the opponent's embrace, he looked at everyone again. "Ah, I forgot to introduce. This is my brother Ace," Luffy said. Usopp looked at Luffy strangely and asked, "When did you have a brother? Why haven't I heard you mention it?" Ace looked at Usopp and said, "You are Luffy's friends, forget it. I am Luffy's sworn brother. I am the elder brother and he is the younger brother." After hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. "So that's what I said," Usopp said. Zoro looked at Ace and asked, "I see, but I want to ask a question. How did you find us?" Ace's expression was very casual, and he said, "Ah, I didn't look for it on purpose. It's just because I was passing here tonight, and I happened to find a group of travelers here who were attacked by the centipede. By the way, I waved to save you." Everyone thinks this reason is really strange. But there is no other easy explanation. Luffy said to Ace with a happy face, "Ace, we are really brothers and have a destiny." Ace said happily to Luffy, "Luffy, you've grown so big. You were such a little one at that time. I still remember how we fought at that time. I lost every time," Luffy said with a smile. The sworn brothers were talking and laughing. Others also relaxed. It was just a false alarm. After Luffy and Ace had a big narration, Luffy brought Ace over again. "Ace, and everyone. Let's eat this roasted centipede with two heads," Luffy said. "What?" Usopp and Chopper immediately had expressions of fear and disgust. Rog also sighed helplessly. Ace smiled wryly, "I think everyone's tastes are different from yours. Luffy is a big eater, and Ace naturally knows it, and not only eats a lot, but can eat anything." Ace looked at Rog and Usopp and said, "Luffy just told me that you are on a voyage adventure together. Thank you for taking care of Luffy." Usopp immediately said proudly, Where?" Luffy asked Ace again, "Ace, why did you come to Alabasta?" Ace said, "I came here to find someone to capture." But according to the intelligence, he may have already left here. Luffy asks strangely, are you arresting someone? Well, I told you just now. I am a member of the Whitebeard Pirates. The villain who killed his companion is running for his life. So I want to catch him back, Ace said. Luffy understood a little more, and said with a serious expression, you want to catch the person who kills his companions. Then you must catch him. For companions, Luffy cherishes them very much. Killing one's companions is an extremely evil that cannot be forgiven. Sure, Ace said. Then the burly young man said to the others, it's getting late. Everyone is tired too. Go ahead and rest. I need a rest too. Luffy first ran to the roasted two-headed centipede and said, I want to eat the roasted centipede. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 273. MS Merry Christmas. Looking at Mr. 7 and MS Father's Day who walked in. MS Merry Christmas said, it turns out to be you three. It was these three people who came to help fight. MS Merry Christmas felt a little surprised but expected. After being persuaded by Mr. 7 and others, MS Merry Christmas and Mr. 2 also stopped being at war with each other. Forget it. The slave family doesn't want to get on bad terms with you, Mr. 2 said. MS Merry Christmas. I brought the black tea again and took a sip to relax my mood. Anyway, the boss asked the five of us to form a very strong combination. Now everyone's goal is King Cobra in that palace. MS said Merry Christmas. Now the five of them could see the king's palace from the window, which was about 1,000 meters away. Mr. 2 rushed to the window, looked at the king's palace and said, ah, you just sneaked into that palace, right? Yes, but you need to find a way to learn more about the structure in the king's palace first. MS Merry Christmas said. Mr. 2 touched his heavily made-up face. That's it? It turns out that the slave family was asked to find a way to infiltrate, Mr. 2 said. Mr. 2 can imitate anyone, so he only needs to infiltrate into the king's palace and figure out the layout inside. Only then can MS Merry Christmas dig a hole in the ground and sneak in. Mr. 2 touched his face with his right hand again, and his face quickly began to deform. The original she-male face with heavy makeup turned into a burly face. This is the face of a soldier from the Royal Army of Alabasta that Mr. 2 came into contact with. This is not very good. Change a few more faces. Mr. 2 kept adjusting, thinking about what face he should use to penetrate into the king's palace. MS Merry Christmas and Mr. 7 and MS Father's Day. Mr. 7 still has that cheerful uncle face. He said, then MS and I will provide long-range reconnaissance and sniper fire support on Father's Day. After all, there will definitely be many threatening enemies here. Our long-range sniper can provide fire suppression. Ha ha ha. MS also said happily on Father's Day, our sniper strength is unmatched. Gwagwagwa. Mr. 7 is carrying a long wooden box. Inside is a powerful weapon. Mr. 7 and MS. Father's Day do not have strong combat capabilities, but their long-range sniper capabilities are surprisingly strong. Together they can overwhelm a very powerful foe. MS Merry Christmas said, okay, then you guys do your best. Don't worry, we will do well. Ha ha ha, Mr. 7 said. Please wait for our good news. Gwagwagwa, MS said on Father's Day. Mr. 2 then rushed out of the room and said, I need to carefully find out which face I want to put on. Mr. 7 and MS Father's Day then discussed some information with MS Merry Christmas and then left. MS Merry Christmas looked at Mr. 4 again. At this time, Mr. 4 fed Lesu with roasted meat, and he also ate it. Okay, let's find an opportunity to practice more combat, MS Merry Christmas said. After Mr. 2 rushed to the street, he first changed his face into an ordinary middle-aged man and pretended to be a citizen, observing the area around the king's palace. Mr. 2 himself is a super pretender. Not only can he imitate the appearance of other people through the imitation fruit, but he can also imitate the personalities of different people perfectly. Pretending to be an ordinary citizen, Mr. Two walked through a series of buildings and arrived at the street where the king's palace was located. Looking at the king's palace from here, this magnificent palace with a height of meters stands at the end of the street. Around the palace is now a temporary fortification piled full of sandbags. All kinds of artillery and machine guns are arranged. A large number of heavily armed elite soldiers of the king's army were deployed around the palace. And now the crowd around the king's palace has been evacuated. Now it is not easy to observe the king's palace closer. What should we do? Mr. Two frowned and said. Even with the ordinary appearance of this middle-aged man, if he gets close to him, he will probably be questioned and cause unnecessary trouble. For Mr. Two, it is now necessary to find a way to detect the situation inside the king's palace as soon as possible. The iron walls of the king's palace feel impenetrable. When Mr. Two was worrying, suddenly there was the sound of a carriage. Mr. Two quickly hid. I saw a carriage coming from another street. This carriage is trying to enter the street leading to the king's palace. Mr. Two looked at the carriage, which was obviously used to transport goods. And the one driving the carriage was a king's army. Looking at the carriage, Mr. Two had an idea. The king's army driving this carriage is still driving the carriage. Suddenly he felt a gust of cold wind blowing from his left side. Out of the corner of his eye he finally saw a kick coming. The King Jun was kicked to the ground and then unconscious. You came at the right time. Mr. Two touched the body of this king's soldier with his hand, and quickly obtained this person's appearance and voice with his ability to imitate the fruit. Soon the king's army was stripped naked and thrown into a dark alleyway. A king's army exactly like him rode on the wagon just now and continued to march. Mr. Two turned into the king's army and drove the carriage towards the king's palace as if he were a fake. The carriage finally arrived in front of the majestic palace of the king. The fortifications made of countless sandbags blocked the way like an extra layer of city walls, and the muzzle of the machine gun was pointed coldly at the carriage. In front of piles of sandbags, a king's army officer stepped forward and ordered, "Stop and inspect." Mr. Two stopped the delivery carriage and got out of the carriage. The Royal Army officer walked up to him again and said, "Okay, let's check the documents." Mr. Two handed the officer the certificate of the king's soldier he had obtained previously. The officer of the king's army nodded after reading the certificate, and said, "You checked the goods in the carriage." 4 soldiers of the king's army stepped forward and began to enter the carriage, unloading boxes of goods, and then directly opened them for inspection. These are some daily necessities such as fresh vegetables, fruits, and fish. However, the 4 soldiers of the king's army checked carefully so that no trace of explosives and weapons would be brought in. "Is everything okay? Then it can be released. You can go in," the king's army officer said after the inspection was completed. Mr. Two got on the carriage again and drove the carriage forward. Enter further ahead through a gap in the sandbag. In front of it is the huge gate of the king's palace. Above the palace, there are also a large number of king's troops erecting cannons and machine guns. Mr. Two drove the carriage to the palace gate. The gate slowly opened, only partially, but it was enough for him to drive the carriage in. After driving the carriage in, Mr. Two quickly discovered a mechanism made of magnets on the inside of the gate, which would react if a metal weapon was brought in. "It's really heavily guarded," Mr. Two said silently in his heart. Continuing to move forward, Mr. Two was guided by a king's army officer and a team of 10 soldiers, and the carriage drove to a courtyard specially used to store daily necessities. "You can take a break. Someone will help you unload the cargo," the king's army officer said. "Yeah, okay," Mr. Two said calmly. But at this time Mr. Two was extremely happy. Now everything here is free for him to conduct reconnaissance. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Li are a dream. Chapter 274. Then Mr. Two started to leave here. Quickly came to a corridor. This corridor leads to other areas. And here you can also see some court attendants coming and going. Okay, there is another way. Mr. Two quickly found another young female waiter. While she was not paying attention, Mr. Two knocked her out and then touched the body of the waitress. Mr. Two turned into a slender young waitress and started walking in the palace. The waitress was stripped of her clothes and thrown into a bush. Mr. Two quickly reached a staircase in the palace, which led to a higher level. Here Mr. Two first walked with frivolous steps for a while, and then started to dance wildly. Mr. Two sang in the soft voice of a waitress, "I just like to be a woman, I also like to be a man, oh, the slave family is neither male nor female, but a she-male, la 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 la." Mr. Two sang and danced to his heart's content. In this way, Mr. Two continued to the third floor of the palace. In the corridor on the third floor, Mr. Two continued singing and dancing. However, he soon saw a figure approaching in front of him. Mr. Two was stunned. This figure is a young girl with short orange hair and a light robe. She looks elegant and beautiful. Those eyes were filled with a kind of innocence. It was Nami. It's actually her. Mr. Two was a little surprised, and his body was shaking with anger. Mr. Two spent a lot of money to hunt down Wai Wei before, but all ended in failure. Apart from Wai Wei, Sanji and Nami are the most impressive in his memory. Although Nami doesn't give him as much hatred as Vivi and Sanji, but because Nami is with them makes him feel angry enough. If it wasn't inconvenient now, he would have attacked Nami a long time ago. Wait, then Princess Wai Wei and the boy with curly eyebrows are also here, Mr. Two said in a low voice. There are not only the biggest target Cobra, but also Vivi and Sanji. This shows that Wai Wei and the others are indeed here safely. When he thought of this, Mr. Two became even more angry. But now the overall situation is more important, so Mr. Two has no choice but to continue to endure. Mr. Two moved around quietly like a real waitress. Nami was very relaxed, and the last two passed by. Nami also glanced back at Mr. Two. Of course, she wouldn't take it to heart, because she would never have guessed that this waitress was actually the senior agent of the Baroque studio who had frightened her to death in Katla. Mr. Two continued walking forward. But suddenly a voice sounded. "Nami, wait for me." This sound is very familiar to Mr. Two. It was the target he had failed to attack, Princess Wai Wei. Mr. Two looked ahead and saw Wai Wei jogging towards Nami, who had already passed by. Wai Wei couldn't help but glance at Mr. Two while jogging. However, this waitress did not attract her attention for too long. But Wai Wei still looked at him for 2 more seconds before continuing to jog. Wai Wei also passed Mr. Two. But at this time, Wai Wei felt a weak murderous aura emanating from the side, as if there was an attack momentum. Mr. Two endured it, he could not be exposed. Wai Wei also continued to catch up with Nami. "Wai Wei, why are you so slow?" Nami asked. "Sorry, I just talked with my father for a while at the Sky Garden on the roof." "Alright, now let's go to the antique room to see those treasures," Wai Wei said. The two of them headed to the lower level together. The waitress that Mr. Two turned into was also excited for a while. He heard very important information. Mr. Two continued to walk forward pretending to be quiet. And Wai Wei and Nami continued to walk to the back of the corridor, where there was a staircase leading to the next floor at the end. Wai Wei suddenly looked back at the waitress who hadn't walked out of the corridor. Nami said, "What's wrong?" Wai Wei turned her head and said, "It's okay. But I seem to think there is something weird about that waitress. It seems that I have seen her somewhere." "Forget it, I am too suspicious." Nami and Wai Wei continued to walk to the back end of the corridor. They went down the stairs together because Nami wanted to see the antiques in the palace. After all, if there are no ready-made gold and silver treasures here, it would be nice if you can get some antiques. Mr. 2 left the corridor on the third floor and continued going up. When I finally reached the fifth floor, I suddenly smelled a fragrance from here. It smells so good, Mr. 2 said. This fragrance is like a mixture of meat, seafood, milk, etc. Mr. 2 is also a little hungry. I thought it would be nice to try the food here. Okay, let's go take a look. Mr. 2 acted quickly. He proceeded down the corridor, which had rooms on its side. Finally Mr. 2 arrived in front of a door. The scents come from this door. Mr. 2 opened the door to the room. Anyway, now that she looks like a waitress, no one will doubt her too much. After entering the room, I saw a large kitchen. It is as huge as 10 rooms. There are a variety of fruits and vegetables, meat, seafood, and drinks here. Vegetables like cabbage, cauliflower, radish, eggplant, pumpkin, peas, onions, beets, tomatoes are all available. Fruits such as apples, pears, peaches, bananas, watermelons, hawthorns, blackberries, pineapples, melons, figs, and prickly pears are all available. Meats such as beef, mutton, pork, chicken, duck, goose, pigeon, and camel are countless. For example, seafood such as sardines, crabs, scallops, squid, jellyfish, kelp, and whale meat are all available. For example, drinks such as wine, liquor, sake, champagne, liqueur, juice, milk, and ice water are all enough for people to drink all over the world. But the most eye-catching thing is the pots and stoves, where delicious food is being cooked. There are also 5 chefs cooking there. But the one in the middle quickly caught Mr. 2's attention. It was a man with blonde hair, wearing an apron and cooking. Okay, give me some more salt and sugar. Just a spoonful of both. This calm and leisurely voice sounded. Mr. 2's eyes widened. He will never forget the one who knocked him into the air. It was Sanji who was cooking, and he also felt someone behind him. Turned after putting salt and sugar for seasoning. Sanji saw a waitress standing by the kitchen door. Although it felt a bit weird, Sanji still said politely when he saw a woman, "Ma'am, you are here to serve the food." Mr. 2 also immediately regained his composure and said quickly, "Yes." His voice is exactly the same as the lady's, and it is not detectable at all. Sanji continued, "The dishes I made are almost ready. You can bring them over later. But you can take a rest now. There are seats there, please sit down." Mr. 2 glanced at the seats in the kitchen and said politely, "No, I'll wait." Pirate Plant Fruit. Author, Lee A Dream. Chapter 275. Sanji turned back and continued cooking. Mr. 2 is observing Sanji. Mr. 2 was filled with hatred in his heart, so Sanji knocked him away. The embarrassment after the battle with Katla was still fresh in his memory. Sanji's dislike and contempt for transvestites cannot be forgiven in his opinion. However, during observation, Mr. 2 had to admit that Sanji was really a master at cooking. The movement was deft, even graceful. In the eyes of many people, cooking is serving others. But Sanji performed exquisite cooking skills like a nobleman who can play the piano. Sanji continued cooking for a while, and then he started serving the dishes. Soon, a plate of seafood was prepared. Sanji said as he brought this plate of seafood over and gave it to Mr. 2. "Okay, take this plate of seafood first," Sanji said. Mr. 2 took it over. "Don't worry. I'll send it over right away," Mr. 2 said in a feminine voice. Sanji said politely, "Okay, girls have worked hard." After watching the waitress transformed by Mr. 2 walk away, Sanji thought about something. When the waitress was behind him just now, she always felt a pair of murderous eyes looking at him. That murderous aura seems to have been encountered before. Forget it, why think so much? I'm afraid I'm too attracted to beauties. That's why I always feel like I'm being watched. Sanji went back to the pot to cook. Mr. 2 walked out of the kitchen with a plate of seafood. After walking for a while to make sure there was no one around, he started to look at the seafood on the plate. Stupid, who knows how to serve food? But I want to taste your skills. Mr. 2 started to eat this plate of seafood. Once the seafood is in the mouth, it is really delicious and has a strong taste. Although the seafood is fresh, it has no fishy smell. There is only the taste of the rich sauce seeping into the seafood meat. Both sardines and squid are delicious. Well, it's really delicious. Mr. 2 was full of praises and quickly wiped away all the sardines, squid, and scallops on the plate. After finding a remote place and throwing away the plate, Mr. 2 even licked his lips with his tongue. Indulge in the incomparably delicious taste. Asshole curly eyebrows, although I hate you. But I have to admit, I like your cooking very much. Mr. 2 continues to the top of the palace. After reaching the th floor in a row, it finally reached the last step. Continuing up from this staircase is the top of the king's palace. Okay, Cobra is here, Mr. 2 said. Mr. 2 keep going. Continue going up the stairs. Finally came to an exit from this exit. I saw here is a square garden. Surrounding it is the roof area of the palace. The garden is filled with trees and flowers. Obviously, this is the hanging garden of the king's palace. The trees and flowers here are very elegant, and there are not so many gorgeous plants. Mr. 2 observe here very carefully. All movements here are very important. Mr. 2 saw a seat on the grass in the middle of the sky garden. There are a few chairs around. There was a man sitting there on the chair. He was reading a book at this time. Mr. 2 squatted down and moved carefully behind the grass and trees in the sky garden. As he got closer, the person's face became clear. This person is none other than Nefertali Cobra. Mr. 2 observed the king carefully. Crocodile ordered that he must be captured alive. Of course, the main purpose of Mr. 2 coming here this time is to investigate the situation. For Mr. 2, this is not the first time to observe Cobra up close. He had previously shaken Cobra's hand pretending to be an officer of the king's army, so he was even able to quickly change into Cobra's appearance. But somehow Mr. 2 felt that he was going to do something. If it's just like this, leaving here feels that there is no greater effect. In terms of being competitive and surprising, Mr. 2 is also one of the best in Baroque studio. After thinking about it, Mr. 2 had an idea in mind. He's going to turn into a human being and scare Cobra. Cobra, who was sitting by the table, was concentrating on reading at this time. This book tells the history of Alabasta. Although it was calm on the surface, Cobra was extremely sad and indignant in his heart. Alabasta, his beloved country. It can even be said to be the country with the longest history among the countries affiliated with the world government. The greatness of the past made Cobra deeply proud. He was not only proud of his country as a king, but also being proud of the country as an Alabasta citizen. There was hope for Alabasta, for this great country to be revived. Since Cobra became king when he was young, he not only inherited the responsibility of governing the country from the previous generation of kings. And he has his own bigger ideas to make Alabasta a glorious country again. Because of that goal, Cobra sacrificed himself and worked hard. At that time, the people and countless fighters were chasing him and working hard with him. Alabasta's greatness requires not only his own efforts, but also the concerted efforts of countless people. But things always turn out unexpectedly. Since the dancing powder incident, and a series of terrorist attacks thereafter, the civil war finally broke out. The tragic civil war grew like a snowball, and countless families were destroyed. The original hope turned into despair, and the original love turned into hatred. The rebel forces grew geometrically. Even the boy who met Cobra in person when he was a child, finally appeared as the leader of the rebel army when he grew up. However, he was assassinated not long ago. Before seeing whether the light of Alabasta could be reappeared, he left the world forever. Can you hear me, Koza? Cobra said subconsciously. After saying the name, Cobra woke up with a start. He looked nervously at the table in front of him and put the book back. It seems that I was too engrossed in reading, Cobra said with a sigh of relief. Cobra closed his eyes again and again, trying hard to cheer himself up. Crocodile is the chief culprit, and he assassinated Kosha, so Crocodile's conspiracy must not be allowed to succeed. Otherwise, all those who lost their lives because of this tragic war will not be able to rest in peace. Your Majesty, Cobra. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. Cobra trembled when he heard it. He raised his head hard and looked around. In front of him, he saw a burly figure standing there. That burly figure, that rough face. And that voice that will never be forgotten. Kosa Cobra felt his body stiffen. In front of him was Kosha standing less than 10 meters away from him. He knew Kosha's appearance and voice. When Kosha became the leader of the rebel army, the photos were often exposed by newspapers, and the voice was broadcast through the phone bug broadcast and could be heard everywhere. Cobra also paid attention to him, because he had personally met this young man when he was a child.